We now have the first session of the day, before which may I now invite Dr. B. Chandrasekar to come over the dais.
Beyond that, I was actually looking forward to this, but unfortunately, due to some pressures in my college, I'm also the control recognitions of the college. We all know our exams are going on right now. From morning 9 o'clock, I had to go out to check if they have uploaded the questions. So, because of that, I'm also IQC coordinator in college, so other works are there. So, I could not respond to Father Jagdish when he approached me for this. So, at one point of time, I thought I might not be there because the way Satyajit functions, I know that he wanted me to actually give the abstract on a particular date, which I didn't do. He said another date for paper, that was in Windows. So I thought my name will be removed. Because that's the practice of Satyajit, because they always take things beforehand. But fortunately, we are kind-hearted for the Jagdish. I'm still here. And also, as I told you, as part of the department, I'm part of this department, so I'm very happy. Now, hope you can see some Sanskrit courses I want to mention. This is a shloka from Bhagavad Gita. I thought I'll take it as the first step for my talk on such. Before that, I was actually intrigued when principal was talking about the self. He said he looked at it from a sociological angle, as that which develops. I have a premise based on a particular age. It says that you are not one but three. Every person is not one but three. The one he thinks himself to be, the one others think himself to be, and the one he really is. What principle said about the formation of the self deals with the first two, the one you think yourself, the one others think yourself to be. Of course, later Father Rector also mentioned about the spiritual aspect. It is that which we talk of who I really am. So these three make it. So that's the premise that I had, and luckily principal came out with that idea. Why I mentioned this is, in my presentation, I may read some portions here and there, but my thing is basically from this particular point. And second thing is, when we talk of man, it is the complex whole. It is neither the psychological, nor the psychical, nor the physical, nor the material, but also the spiritual. So that's why I mentioned you are not one but three. So when we talk of the development of the self, as the principal mentioned, it is with the physical self or the psychical self. But here in Indian philosophy, he also mentioned another word. Apart from development, he also mentioned one word as a passing reference, unfoldment. Here, the realization of the discovering of the self is the unfoldment. That's why I started with the spiritual self. It is not something, as he mentioned, when you talk of discovering, he said he had some title discovering self. Because discovery is looking at something which is already there. But here, the self is already there. Here is the premise with which in India we have developed our care of the self. So, in that manner, it is nothing but an unfoldment. In fact, another term which refers to the cosmic self in Indian philosophy, in Sanskrit, is Brahman. That Brahman comes from the root which means Brah. Brah means that which grows. In other words, it's unfoldment. So, this I thought I can give a response to what he said. But now going to this particular shloka, this shloka is the 11th shloka in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita. Prajñāvādāśca bhāṣase gatāsuna nānashocanci pandita. That is, meaning is given there. Although he speaks, because when the Bhagavad Gita took place, Arjuna was reluctant to fight. At that time, Krishna tells this particular thing. What he means is, he addresses Arjuna like this. Bhagavan Vacha means the Lord speaks. Although you speak wisely, he tells Krishna, when he tells Arjuna, although you speak wisely, you are lamenting for something that should not make you sad. Those who really know the truth do not grieve for the dead or for the living. Those who know the truth do not grieve or feel bad for the dead, because what Krishna means here, what is he going to talk about in this particular verse? That is, you should know the real, what you are, what they are. Because we all know when Arjuna was lamenting, why should I fight my teacher, Drona? Why should I fight my grandfather, Bhishma? Why should I fight my brothers, Drona, Duryodhana? That is when he says that, in other words, we all have come into this world just as they have come into a railway platform. In the railway platform, various people come from various places, waiting for a particular train. We all have come into this world waiting for something. It is in that premise that this particular shloka I thought of citing, and it helps me to go into yoga further. To yoga, the recognition of man as Purusha particular, two terms which you need to understand from Indian philosophy. One is Purusha, one is Prakriti. And one thing I should tell you, yoga philosophy depends on Sankhya for its metaphysics. And Sankhya is one of the orthodox schools of Indian philosophy, which can be kept as dualistic in our regular terms, because they accept two realities. One, the self, the other one is matter. Self is termed as Purusha in Sanskrit, and matter is termed as Prakriti in Sanskrit. And Purusha or self, according to Sankhya, is conscious but not active. It is conscious. It can make others, but it is conscious. Whereas on the other hand, Prakriti is active but not conscious. So what Sankhya says, these two have come together for the evolution of birth. That it's not creation. Here word about Sankhya is evolution. Something that evolved from Purusha Prakriti combination. This combination, these two are totally different. One is conscious, one is unconscious. How the two come? They give an example of a lame man and a blind man. Lame man can see but not walk properly. Blind man cannot see but he can walk properly. So what they say is the lame man sits on top of the blind man. He shows the way and the blind man walks. Something like that, this happens. How this relationship between Purusha and Prakriti happened, it's not given, but they say that when once the Purusha comes into contact, the other evolutions of Prakriti embroils the Purusha like that. That's all metaphysics they go, we will not go into that. But why I'm interested in yoga is, taking this metaphysics, yoga is also applying it to our personal life, our day-to-day life. So only in that respect I thought I will bring it here. So to yoga, the recognition of man and Purusha Prakriti combination seems to be the fundamental step. So I'll just leave it on my own opinion. Why I'm interested here is, this particular Purusha Prakriti combination is what I want to emphasize as the concept of person. Why I mention is, we as human beings, we are endowed with a body, with senses. And Indian philosophy talks of 10 types of senses, 5 Karmendras, 5 Jnanendras, sense organs and organs of action, plus the Antakana. Antakana is the inside organ, which is the mind, plus ego. Then we got the self, which is the charity, like the charity, like that. So here, when we talk of my person, it is not really the body, it is not really the mind, it is not really the ego. Because when I say I can say here. When I call Jagdish, he will say yes. When I call Anjali, somebody will say yes. When I call Satish, somebody will say yes. So somebody will say I. The I is common to all. But you all are different from one another. Then what is that I? That is what I want to give as a response to the principle, because here there is something that is at the time of birth. What is given birth? The body evolves, the mind evolves, brain evolves, they all grow. But that which is born, that ultimate is the self in Indian philosophy. And that in fact in Tamil, this self is identified in Sanskrit, we call it as Purusha. In Tamil, I don't know how to refer in Tamil, we have the term Ātman for referring to Purusha. There is also another word, our lexicon gives another word, word that's Uyir. Uyir means life principle. That is also referred to self. So, that which is the basis of life, that is what self is. And then, from yoga, many sutras can be substantiated for this time. Of course, I am just giving it in a nutshell. Here, these sutras can be taken together and summarized the following. They can be summarized. The Purusha when established in himself, because the Purusha is established here and also elsewhere. That's what it is. Purusha when established in himself after Kaivalya, that is the liberation. That's the idea of liberation in yoga is called Kaivalya from Prakriti. That because there the Purusha and Prakriti are related. When once the Purusha gets out of the relation, that is liberation according to Sankhya and Yoga philosophy. So that J.H. Woods translates that word as Kaivalya as isolation. The isolation of Purusha from Prakriti. Because liberation, liberation, some people say going to heaven, some people say merging with God. Here it is liberation from the Prakriti, the unconscious matter. And also when the self is in constant contact with the body, it is bound by the modifications of the mind, it's bound by certain hindrances like ego, avidya, ignorance, raga, attachment, dvesha, hatred, and abhinishya, will relate. All these modifications and hindrances affect us. Now, getting rid of this is liberation in yoga, and that self, that why I am saying this is self as me, as embodied in the body. That is one self. But the self looking for liberation, liberating from Prakriti, and that is the true reality. Because from my study of Carl Jung's analytical psychology, when we talk of man, we immediately refer to the ego. Ego is only an element of Prakriti according to Sankhya. It's only a matter which is in conjunction. Only difference is it identifies itself with this self and thinks that it is a self. And that is the idea of self. Ego is the idea of the self. Now, when I say I say I am fat, I am tall, I am short. That I refer to the body. When I say I am angry, I am sad, it refers to the mental state. Now, when I say I am I, what does it mean? That is the real identity that we have to come to, and that is the Kaivalya that they talk of. So now coming to this Yoga Sutras, the person here can be understood psychologically and also physical appearance, which I mentioned already. And there is one more thing, namely mind, that quite a feeling apart from Purusha Prakriti, you need to understand Ahankara, that's ego, Asmita, the sense of person, which is again a form of ego which relates itself to the self and the sense of personality, and then vrittis. Vrittis is the modifications. The mind modifies, like sense, sleeping. Sleeping is also a kind of mental modification, memory, all those things like that. And then there's one more thing, the mind is referred as manas or manak, which is translated by J.H. as mind stuff, like that. Because yoga, the first basic definition of yoga is yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Chitta means a combination of which is called the mind stuff, because it's a combination of mind, ego, and buddhi. These three termed as chitta. Now, vritti is modification. When I am here, when I am talking also, various thoughts come to me. That's why sometimes I go this way, that way. So I want to read, but then I am again doing my. Because as teachers, when we talk, we just go everywhere, and that's how I want to read. But anyway, what happens is this is the modification. When we are, as a human being, these modifications affect us. And because of that, we are involved in what we do. But yoga says that we have to get out of that modification. That is the chitta vritti. Nirodha means destruction, cessation. And then, one particular sutra that I want to mention. This is the sixth sutra of second book of Yoga Cancer comprises of 4 books. Yoga Sutra comprises of 4 books. Second book, sixth sutra talks like this. Drishdashna Shaktyoho Ekatmate of Ātman asmita. Asmita is the ego, the sense of egoism, sense of personality. Egoism is the identification of the seer with the instrument of seeing. And ego is the result of this. Asmita is nothing but the result of ignorance. As I told you, the Kleshas hindrance, one of them is avidya, ignorance. It is because of ignorance that I take myself in what I am. That's why I mentioned what you think you are. I take myself in what I am. You think of me in some manner because you look at me as a person, not as a person but as an ego that I am reflecting. So therefore, yoga refers to this as the self that is beyond the ego, that is beyond the mind, that is beyond the senses. Because when I say, as I told you, my face, my shirt, my watch, my paper, then who is that mind? That I is a self. So that self is described as seer or witness, sakshi. That is the inner control. Because, like I said, the chariot, the self controls my body. My mind thinks, it thinks of certain things, it rationalizes. My eyes see, my ears hear. But what controls all this is my inner control. Likewise, for the world, for the Prakriti, self is the inner controller. And two shloka, these two, that is verse 29 of chapter 2 and verse 4 of chapter 1, which when taken together gives us a clear picture of the nature of the seer or the self. The seer is nothing but pure consciousness or power of seeing, which appears to see through the mind buddhi complex. Because when I am saying, when I ask somebody what is this, they say it's microphone. How do you know? I see it. But it's not simply like that. It's not just seeing this. When I see, the object should get impressed in my mind. What impresses that in my mind? What is it that makes my categories of what a microphone is? Because I may have, this is not a microphone if no electricity passes through it. Am I right? It's a microphone only when it's connected to the amplifier and only when the electricity is passing through it. If not, it is just an object. You know what happens in assembly with this mic. In the state assemblies, you know what happens with this. I hope you all know. They used to crash the others. Now, is this a microphone there? So, what happens is, this is an object which has the power from somewhere. Similarly, our words have the power from somewhere. And that is the self which philosophy takes, unlike the sociologists. So, I want to just quote one particular person. I.P. Sachdeva has written a book on the Sankhya of personality. He says, does not speak of man merely as a biological psychological organism, but considers man as self of Purusha. This approach, he adds, quote, gives a complete vision of what a man potentially is, unquote. It is evident from now that man should not be viewed in relation to self. I want to mention that. So, just go to the next one. The person in yoga can categorize both negative. There's one more thing. The concept of person in yoga can categorize both negative and positive. In the negative sense, it refers to the asmita, the sense of personality. But in the positive sense, it refers to the isolated, liberated self. That is the self, Purusha that is called. The two shlokas that I mentioned, shloka 7 and 8 here. One thing, shloka 2 of book 4, shloka 7 and 8 of book 4. All these things can be seen to understand what a true self is. I just conclude with that of these three. From these threefold works are manifested in each state only those desires fitting to that state. That is, each one. And when you are looking at the ego, you got one function. When you are looking at the mind, you got one function. But you are looking at the whole, the complete, you got another function. This negative conception of person can be understood best in the manner in which A.K. Majumdar understood the Sankhya concept of man. He says, quote, individual Purusha is nothing but the absolute Purusha as invested in the three gunas. The gunas are executed in such mental states as the unselfish strength, spiritual pursuit, egoism, dullness, etc. In the positive sense, egoic person, egoic conception of person revolves around the liberated person. Now, why I am making this division? I will go into that. not very clear, doesn't matter. Non-attachment of passionlessness is understood by Patanjali, the author of Yoga Sutra, as one of the, or systematic, I can say author, systematizer, as one of the means of restraining imperfections. Sutra 15 of book 1 and 6, 15 and 16 of book 1 define non-attachment because how I was talking to two selves, self-embodied and the liberated self. Now, how to get to that liberated self? There are two parts of such as one is practice, abhyasa. The other one I will come later. Practice abhyasa. Vyasa is bhasha for Yoga Sutra. In his bhasha, in the 12 to 14 sutras of book 1, Vyasa compares this flow of mental operations to the flow of river stream. He says that the flow can be in two directions, towards good and towards evil. The flow towards isolation, towards discrimination is good, and the flow towards object non-discrimination is evil. Such pronouncements make it clear that the understanding of personal yoga can be understood with respect to self. Okay. So, apart from practice, there is one thing, and there is non-attachment. What happens is, these two practice and non-attachment should go together. When I, for example, take ice cream, I like it, I'm attached to it. So next time when I go there, I prefer that because of my previous experience. That attachment, we should not have that. Now, during this COVID times, how many of you or how many of us go to hotels? Earlier we used to go very often, but now we restrain. That sort of restraint is good. Now, here we are not forced, but we are restrained by ourselves. So, the identification of self should be from ourselves. It should not be forced upon by others. And there is one more text apart from Yoga Sutra, that prior to that, called Sankhya Karika of Ishvara Krishna. I have taken some verses, so maybe when I give you a paper, people can read it. So there are certain verses which also talk of the self as the witness and seer, especially the verses 10, 11, 19, 20 of the Sankhya Karika. 10 and 11 taken together, these two Karikas present us with the idea of Prakriti along with the evidence of Purusha. To put it simply, two Karikas are going to explain the nature of Purusha, the verse of the nature of the unworld Prakriti. Just skip some portions from that. And because here these Karikas try to explain what the self is, what the body is, what the matter is, and what is the difference between the two, and why the self should isolate itself from that. That's all. These are the Karikas that is there, and therefore it is summated. The task of understanding the nature of Purusha is simplified by Karika 19, which mentions two properties of Purusha. They are Purusha is the reverse of Prakriti, the self is the outburst, the reverse of the matter, and two, self is the witness, free from misery and non-agent. Now, when I am here, I think that I am talking. Now, I give just a small example, just to give a deviate. I am talking. My voice is heard to you. Do you hear my voice directly or through the speakers? You hear my voice through the speakers, especially people at the back. So what happens is, these speakers represent my voice. Similarly, here, when I say that I am the speaker, I can think that I am a speaker, but for you, the speakers are the physical speakers are because, or somebody who is in the online mode, who is listening to my talk, or to the seminar in the online mode. For them, that object is the instrument, and I am the speaker. Similarly, the self is the main body, mind, ego, and instruments. This is the idea of Indian philosophy, especially of yoga also. And some of the other things I will just skip. We are going to come to a major portion because apart from talking of this self in metaphysical sense, I find yoga to be relevant to our contemporary also, to our day-to-day life also. That's what I want to mention here because metaphysical thing you all will be doing. As also I mentioned, all these karikas which you can go through, all these sutras of yoga you can take. One more thing. When you talk of the relationship between Purusha and Prakriti, what is that kind of relationship? According to Sankhya, that relationship is organic. When two coaches are linked to each other, railway coaches are linked to each other, there's a link. The third thing, as I said, when I'm talking to you, there's this microphone or speaker as a link. That's the connection between me and you, linked by the third thing. But the connection between Purusha and Prakriti is not like that. It's not a third thing coming to it. It is something organic. Organic, you all know, it is there within, like the relationship between the fingers and the hand, relationship between the hand and the body. It's an organic, because once the hand is removed, it becomes waste. But this can be connected to some other device also. But my hand, if it is removed, that's why it's organic. So the relationship between Purusha and Prakriti is organic. Looked in this way, the individual is the single self. Looked in this way, the individual, the man, is nothing but the individual self invested with the three gunas. We have one more term in Sanskrit, in philosophy called gunas, which doesn't have a direct meaning in English. It's attributes, not qualities but attributes, because the three of the sattva, rajas and tamas. Sattva refers to the good aspect, the spiritual aspect. Rajas is activity, which is neither good nor bad. Tamas is dullness. Sattva is bright. Tamas is opposite dullness. But rajas, it will go with sattva, it will go with rajas. That's why I mentioned earlier. This is like a stream. The water can flow this way or that way. Similarly, I can identify myself with that. When I say I, the self of me, can identify myself with the body and think that I am the agent. But knowing that I am different, I should look for the highest isolation and liberation. That's the two things here. And one of the Karika, one of the sutras, the second one, Sutra 34, I think. Sutra 34, the last one of the fourth book of Yoga Sutra. Of course, I just saw yesterday that in one book there were 33 that thing. I don't know why I should check it. I went in there last night to check that, look into that. That sutra goes like this: the resolution in the inverse order of the qualities, bereft of any motive of action for the Purusha, is Kaivalya, or it is establishment of the power of knowledge in its own. That is, when this self is identified in the body, I think I am talking here, I am driving there, I am doing that work. But as I told you before, I apologize for my because of my work in college. I am going to be a controller or a teacher only for the next few years. After retirement, before coming to the college, before joining the college, before 96, I joined Vivekananda. Before that, I was just a Chandrasekar. After joining that, I became Chandrasekar, Professor Chandrasekar of Vivekananda College. After retirement, again Chandrasekar. So, this is only a temporary thing. Similarly, the attachment between body and the Purusha and Prakriti is only temporary according to yoga. And one more thing. I just want to show this and indicate that. Before that, one karika of Sankhya karika goes like this, and it has been interpreted like this. There are three parts to this sentence, and we should examine them. I can go to this verse Karika 64 of each of Sankhya Karika, which mentions three characters. I am not. Not is mine. Ego exists not. What does this mean? When I say I am not, what it really means is that I am not now what I thought myself to be. Not is mine. It really means that my present contents are entirely different in kind from those which I thought myself to have during the state of bondage, because of the state of bondage, state of liberation. What I think myself to be at the state of bondage is different from what I think at the state of liberation. Ego exists not. This is the Karika, ego exists not. What it really means is this: I am no longer a selfish egoist. My particular individuality has been completely transformed into universal personality. Now, I just thought I would refer to one psychologist, humanistic psychologist, Abraham Maslow. He talks of characteristics of a real healthy personality. Some characteristics are mentioned. I'll just read one or two like that. Like person with true characteristic, healthy personality, pursues reality more comfortably, is not ashamed of his shortcomings, is generally not much concerned about himself, is characterized by detachment and desire for privacy. He remains serene and happy even in the midst of circumstances that will drive other people to suicide. His interpersonal relation is changed and is characterized by, because when I think that I am not restricted to ego but something beyond, and that self, when I look at myself from that angle, then my attitude towards me and towards others changes, and that is the healthy personality. That's why I given this particular diagram. Of course, it's not mine. I take it from one author, Nicholas DiCaprio. His work on personality theories, a guide to human behavior, 4 diagrams, only 2 of them. We see here, ego is that which is known to others. When you talk to Chandrasekar, or when I talk to you, it's only what I present myself to. That's what you think myself to be my personality. That is the ego. So various stimuli come and I work according to that. Sometimes maneuver if required. But what is not palatable to me, what is not palatable to others, I represent. That's what goes to unconscious psychologists say, as Sigmund Freud had brought in. But then Sigmund Freud stopped it at that where he said we repress. Carl Gustav Jung, who was a disciple of Freud, he looked at the unconscious in a larger sense, as I think Victor mentioned in a different manner, that is of a collective unconscious, because the unconscious, he was mentioning about the personal unconscious, but there's apart from personal unconscious, there's also a collective, the unconsciousness of the clan, of the race. Now, what happens? I must bring everything into my personality. Only then I will look at myself or look at the world in one particular, in a holistic manner. So what happens is, we say the friend, ego, then the persona. The term personality comes from the term persona, which means mask. So whatever personality we talk of ourselves and others, is only a mask that we wear, because we try to suppress our other feelings. So then the personal conscious, what happens is our stimuli, which we can go to the next one also, so that we will just what happens is that division between the conscious side, personal conscious side, unconscious, collective conscious, everything is gone, and we look at ourselves and the world as a total. Our approach to the world will be different when we look at ourselves as the pure, real self, not pure, real self, because that is nothing but the unfoldment. As principal mentioned, it's the sociologically they talk like that. But then here, what I am unfolds through my experiences, through my interactions, through my works. So it is not something that is coming with, you know, the difference between discovery and innovation. Innovation is something that's brought, which is not there. It's brought at during. But here it is already there. So what he mentioned, discovery, it's already there. That is an unfoldment. That is what we call it as a self-realization in Indian philosophy. Of course, in other philosophies also we talk of but the basic understanding of self differs. In fact, Carl Jung, he talks of process of individuation, where he says, I had restructured my center. Normally, when I talk of myself, I revolve around the ego of myself. But he says I should go beyond. But the ego is not the center of the consciousness. But when we bring in the unconscious side, where there are other things that comes into picture, therefore ego cannot be held with the middle, center. Therefore, there's the other one. So there's the other one, which is the main center. He calls it the restructured center. And that restructured center, he named it as self. Not the self that philosophers talk of, but he named it self because of want of any other term. That self is what I find with respect to yoga, which is both at the metaphysical level and also in our level. So I thought I would associate with that. So thank you so much for the kind invitation and also for your patience. Of course, I have taken some 15 minutes extra, but sorry, that's why I mentioned. Anyway, thanks a lot for Jagdish and for Lawrence for Robin, sorry. Thank you all. Let us